Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new video. I just wanted to give you a timeline tour just to kind of show you what does the timeline for one of my short films look like. What does it look like to edit one of these things? What are my best practices? What do I have in mind? Just to kind of give you a peek behind the curtain, a look behind the scenes, and just kind of see what I can kind of show you about my process for editing. And maybe I'll teach you something, but maybe I won't. And I guess I always want to say is as I'm making these short films, and if I give advice, um, every short film has its own needs, right? And I guess like I don't want to say like this is the way to make a short film, right? That's not what I want to say because every short film I make every single one differently, and that's just natural. And I think it's okay to, as you're making something, to embrace that, to find like, well, what about this project? Like, how is it going to change the way that I approach it? Um, I mean, I think that may even be part of the reason that I like and enjoy making short films to begin with, is the fact that in telling new stories, I get to approach them differently and try new things. And um, I think that's part of what's exciting about them is just that idea of they all have their own demands, and the filmmaking process is a process of figuring out with that story how do you approach making it. I think that's what's exciting about it. But without further ado, I just kind of let's start looking into things. So this is actually a pretty simple timeline. Um, I mean, first of all, like the thing I want to point out is that there's barely any overlaps. I like these to the fact that I'm only using 3 layers, and really 2 of them are basically just like, for titles, and um a one VFX shot at the end. Like that's actually unique. Even when I'm not doing VFX, I'm used to working with timelines, um, for my own projects and other people's projects where like there's a bunch of, video tracks on the side. And, especially if I'm cutting between different takes, and even if it's not a multicam setup, just if I'm cutting between different things and I have one thing, down below it, and then I have one thing above it, and, you know, just to have that option of making it easier to take out one element and replace another, just having just stacks of video. I'm used to that. But this is basically just all one single stretch. It almost feels like looking at like a film strip in that sense, right? Just, and I usually don't edit films like that. That's just, and there's a couple reasons that I was able to do it for this film. Like this is nice, like, because when an edit looks like this and it's just this one continuous row of shots, and there's no evidence of like stacking things and breaks, because you can see it in the edit when I've been intercutting and replacing things and going back and forth on scenes like that. But in a film like this, it's just a continuous row of going from this shot to this shot to this shot to this shot, and I think that is a result of the planning, of the storyboarding. I started this film, it started with a script, and then from that I storyboarded it. And as I filmed, I mostly followed the storyboards. There's some things that I changed, like B-roll. I didn't really have an exact plan for. I just kind of got what I got. I wasn't exactly sure what it would look like on the day or what I needed to focus on, so I kind of approached that with a lot of freedom. And I like this kind of rack focus shot. Like I didn't plan to do that, then just kind of tried it on the day. Same with the title shot. This actual, the opening shot. I had no idea that would be the opening shot, but I tried that rack focus from, the trees in the foreground. There's that bokeh background, and then it changes, right? And I just love that. Like, it just occurred to me while editing. I was like, that piece of B-roll would be great for an opening shot. Um, you know, Kind of introduce a title to kind of balance the kind of the visual focal point. And then as it unblurs, you see the trail, and that kind of establishes the setting. And then we show the bench, and then we cut to this. And I guess like I want to talk too about, I feel like my thoughts are kind of scatterbrained, but I'm just kind of going through the timeline and talking about things as they come up. Usually in scenes, the way I cut, is, you start wide, end close, and that's just kind of a good rule of thumb. But there are reasons to break that. And I think something that's interesting about this, when we show the character, we start with his face. And I think that that's important because the emotion of the story goes from, all right, he's at peace, and then throughout, like, oh, here's a noise, and that piece is disturbed. And so I think, like, it makes sense to kind of start with a close up where you can really see that, like, all right, he's relaxed. You start really focused on that, like, that sense of, all right, this hiker is found peace. There's nothing distracting from that. Even though in the context of the edit so far, it doesn't present a great sense of space. But that's also part of the I don't know. I kind of have this theory, kind of about, like, you can present like a wide shot where you can see the character like in full. This is a little bit wider, and or like a shot like this, and this doesn't appear till 30 seconds in. Even though there's other shots for context, we see his feet, which I think are an interesting shot because, like, there's this, like, even just there's expression just in the foot position. I knew that at the time, that I was like, this feels a little silly, but I think there's foot acting that I can do that will help tell the story, and drawing attention to, like, all right, he's on the tip of his toes and then crosses his legs as he tries to say, like, all right, there's something out there, but I'm going to try to be comfortable. I'm going to try to ignore it. I came out here to seek peace, right? But I guess, yeah, like I was saying, it's like I could have started on a shot like this that gives you context for where the character is, what they're doing, the fact that he's sitting on a bench, and you see it all. You see the trail. Like, it gives you complete context for the film. But I start with a close-up, and it's kind of out of context. You see the bench, you see the hiker, you see the trail, and it's all separate. And it isn't until about 15 seconds in that you can a little bit more clearly see him sitting on the bench. And I think just from context clues, you can kind of understand what's going on, and we change angles, and you get a little bit better view. And then you see his feet, and you understand the space a little bit more. But I also think that in drawing that out, in like gradually giving context, I think that helps with the suspense just a little bit, to go like, okay, I see this actor, but where are they? I don't know yet. So let me keep watching and then get a little bit more context each time. The context builds, and that is a part of the storytelling. Using the edit, using cinematography in the edit, cutting between angles intentionally to tell that story. And usually it's the opposite. Like I said, usually I want to give you all the context so you understand the space, understand the scene, understand what the character's doing. But in a film like this, I wanted to kind of go like, benched? Like, what does that mean? Okay, there's the bench, there's the character, and then slowly reveal a little bit more until you understand more as the film goes on. That's kind of what I wanted to do. And that was a decision made in the edit. This film, like, I storyboarded it. Like I said, I had a pretty clear vision for the pace of things. I was following the script pretty closely. But there were a lot of decisions that really made this film get made in the edit. And I think that's true with every film. I think every film, to a certain extent, is made in the edit, even if you have a plan. There's things that you just don't know till you have your footage, and you can actually make decisions about, the film with what you actually have. I think that's the truth. But in these shots of him, like, reacting to the noise, and you have these different angles, right? You have this kind of medium here, a little bit wider with the tree in the foreground, this close up. All of those shots are basically a variation of the same shot. I got them at the same time, and I played through, acted out basically the whole scene. You can kind of see I cut back to the same angle every now and then. Like this angle of the tree, that was one of my favorite angles, just because it kind of it frames the character, right? You get that kind of frame within a frame with the tree in the way, and I like that. I like that depth, and it kind of feels like he's a little bit more. It makes the woods feel a little bit claustrophobic, because that bench is pretty much in a pretty good clearing. Like, when you're there, it feels pretty open, but I wanted to make the woods feel a little bit more suffocating. And I think that helped with that. But yeah, I mean, I basically ran through the whole action in all these shots. Like, in this shot, like, this had a reaction to the noise, both reactions where, he looked one way and then he got up the second time. Same with this shot. Same with this shot. And same with the leg shot too. I mean, everything was just running through that whole first part of the script, basically until it cuts to B-roll and there's kind of a reset, and then the rest of the film was staged a lot more carefully. Now, before we keep looking at the film, I think it's time for a short message, so I will talk to all of you again after the break. See you then.
If you want to be able to support me as a creator, there are several ways that you can make possible the creation of everything that I do. Become a Patreon member. I post all kinds of exclusive content that you can only see first on Patreon. Stuff like behind-the-scenes content for my filmmaking projects, whether that's in-progress scripts, storyboards, rough cuts, anything for my newest films that aren't posted anywhere else besides Patreon. So become a member. There's a whole range of prices, and you can support me even in small ways. That's super meaningful. Supporting me on Patreon too gets you in the credits list of any film that I release while you're a member. And like I said, even a little goes a long way. You can also collaborate with me now through Fiverr. I offer a range of services that could help bring your project to life. And if you've heard any music in the background of this video, that was my music. So feel free to look me up on Spotify or Apple Music or wherever you listen to music. Type in Joe Kendrick. That's JoeKendrick. Look up Joe Kendrick on Spotify.
I mean, this film really does present itself in halves, right? And so just kind of as I'm breaking down the anatomy of the film, this is pretty much the halfway point directly. And you can see that there is this mid-movie shift. Mid-movie, it's 45 seconds in, but this is just such a short film that it's easy to break down in that way. It's easy just to see that all presented. But I mean, yeah, like I said, like you have this first part of the film where you have this hiker. He's peaceful. He's interrupted by the noise a couple times. He's trying to seek peace. Cuts away from that. That's the first part of the story. That's what's happening. And then the second half, it's shot completely differently. There's none of those repeating angles. We're not going to see this shot again, even though we could, and we will see similarly, styled shots, but most of these shots are a good bit closer to the end. We're getting new angles. We're not repeating the same angle. We're in new territory. We're not returning to, all right, we're back to this shot. No, like this is new shots, a little closer, a little more, a little more Dutch, right? We're getting new shots basically every time. I mean, this cuts to the same angle, and this shares an angle, but that's a new shot. And basically, it's kind of showing you we're in new territory. There's no security in the edit of the film anymore, because audiences pick up on that stuff, right? And I think that's why I wanted to do a horror piece, and this is still just hardly dipping my toes in. There's so much more I want to do studying horror. I want to do a short, kind of like David Sandberg shorts. I would love to kind of study that format and try to make something like one of his, kind of haunted house style shorts, right? Because his short films play a lot on that idea of like you're in your house but you're not alone. That discomfort, that idea of like the monster in the closet. That's fundamentally scary, and he taps into that really well. I want to try that at some point as well, because there's just a huge language there. And audiences are really in tune with that. Audiences can feel, especially in horror, they know when the camera is moving, and they know that like, oh wait, we're no longer able to see the whole frame. Something's being hidden. Why is that? They can pick up on that, right? And I don't know, I wanted to play with that a little bit here, kind of cutting between, now we're introducing these point of view shots, right? We're still in that, we still have these third person shots, but I wanted the film to kind of be more personal, now that we've introduced the character, we've seen them react. Now that, we're continuing a little more, I want the film to feel just a little bit more personal. It's a little bit more close, and we literally see their point of view as this monstrous hand appears and disappears, and then they dip down to look below the bench, and that is, we share their point of view. And we get into these shots, and I think these shots are interesting because a lot of these are more rough. Literally, the last half of the film is presented a little more roughly than the first half. In small ways. I think there's, still some polished shots here, right? Some things that are, framed up a little bit nicer. Like, I like the way this shot looks. I like these reaction shots coming to the end. I think those turned out well. I think that shot looks good. There's some shots that I think are framed up just fine. But then there's also shots that, and I think this one looks good too. But there's also shots that are a little bit more, like the point of view shots. There's less happening in frame. There's less depth going on. I think this shot looks nice, but this point of view it's a little more shaky, right? It's not on a tripod, right? It's literally like, yeah, it's like it's handheld, right? So fundamentally, it's just a little bit less um, nice as far as like a shot goes, right? And that's part of the storytelling is using like, all right, we're gonna get that like movement of the hand. I think helps tell the story. And this shot's, you know, it's I don't even know where to start with this shot. This like it's putting the camera on the ground to get that shot, and that's just the function of trying to get the angle I want. But I even think that like everything that comes with a shot like this, where it's on the ground, it's not on a tripod, it's not stable like level. The camera's not level. The background's blown out. Like there's things that are just messy about that shot that are just a little bit more raw than a shot where, you know, I can get a little more depth, get the bokeh where I want it. You know, it's not blown out, the light's how I want it, right? Like, you know, it's on a tripod. Actually, this shot might not be on a tripod. This might be like on the ground as well. But I think it's framed up a little bit nicer. But it's also like the point of a shot like this is we're seeing what could be the monster's point of view, and it's not. We know that by this point, you know, he looks under the bench and the monster's not there. But in a shot like this, like you see him, you know, come down, you know, over his head comes under the bench to check, and you know we can hardly see his expression. We have to squint to see how he's reacting. And I don't know. It's like I don't necessarily think, I'm not saying this to be like pat myself on the back and to say that this was all intentional on the day while I was shooting, but in the edit, piecing it all together, I think that helps tell the story, and I could have edited around that if I didn't think that it helped tell the story. And that's the point. Like, I'm not trying to say all this as if like there's a lot of stuff I was not thinking about on set. I was going through the list, trying to shoot things quickly, set up the camera the best I could. Usually when I film, it's like, you know, I want to be in a space where when I can film, I'm thinking about everything that I can, but really I'm just like, there's a point where I just have to trust my gut. And I just have to go, like, I have all these shots to get done, and I just need to go one by one by one by one, knock them all out. And I can't, you know, waste time, you know, thinking too hard about each shot. There's a point where I just need to trust that, like, all right, I wrote the script, I did the storyboards, I thought about the film, and now it's go time, and I can put all that, you know, in action, and some of that's going to end up on the screen, but there's some stuff that's like I just have to figure out the best space for the camera, see what shot looks the best, and go from there. Just, you know, kind of knock it out, go. And so it's just like piecing it all together. Then in the edit, I can kind of look at the shots, and that's when I can kind of decide, all right, what shot do I want to use? How do I want to cut between them? Now that I've gotten the footage, how can I really make sure that everything tells the story? And that's part of the fun. I think, like, in general, there are parts of the process of filmmaking that are very controllable. You can write the script. You can really control how the script turns out. You can, you know, create storyboards. You can make sure that you're really intentional and controlling about the product that you want to achieve. Even in the edit, you can take as much time as you need, right? And that can be a very controlled process. You're literally controlling the way that the film is turning out. But the filming process itself, you know, there's so much that is just beyond your control. You're going to a location that exists, and, you know, I guess, like, you know, unless you're building your own set, which, you know, I'm usually not doing that. You know, like, there's very little control over the way that things are turning out, especially filming in a natural space. It's like, I don't know that these twigs. I was trying to say sticks and twigs at the same time. I didn't know how they were going to look. And every shot that I got of, like, these kind of fallen trees, they feel a little bit differently, right? It's not just like, oh, it's a fallen tree. Based on how the sticks are looking, they may have a different emotionality to the way that they make you feel looking at them, you know, as it cuts between, like, this shot and a shot like, you know, maybe not that one, but I'm trying to think, is there, like, this one, right? It's like that feels differently, and it's you know, it's zoomed differently. There's different quality to it, but that's the point, is that some of those things, it's like, oh, I want this to feel like it's like a little bit spooky, like this is something that a monster could hide behind. Like, that's kind of what I'm going for there. It's just like, I didn't know that it would look like that till I got to that location and started getting footage. There's surprises that just happen, and I like that. I like that part of the process. I like that shooting always carries surprises with it. And I don't know. It's like you can like try to like go about your film in such a way that shooting isn't super surprising. And there's definitely like most shoots that I do after I, do a scene for a short film. Usually there is some degree of like I'll get the footage and yeah, there will be a lot of surprises, but I still have some feeling if I prepared well. I look at the footage later and I'm like, "Oh yeah, this actually turned out exactly how I was expecting." You know? Like this does like I got what I had in mind, and maybe there were some things that surprised me in getting that, but actually this is what I was expecting. Like we got it. You usually like if I've prepared well, like I'm not thrown off by anything. But there's always things that kind of come up, and you're like, oh, I didn't really know that would make it into the film. I didn't really know that shot would look the way that it does. There's always something, in my opinion, um, and I enjoy that. So that's all I'm trying to say. So I wonder if maybe we should analyze the sound just a little bit more, just so I can scroll and show you just kind of what the timeline looks like. There's not much to say technically. That's why like I wanted most of this to be broken down as like a filmmaking discussion, right? To talk about the construction of the film, how I chose shots, how I went about filming. I thought that was a more important discussion to have with this piece because it's not super technical. I'm pretty much just showing you the footage as it was and just pieced it together in the edit to help tell that story. That's what I was doing with this film. There's not a lot of stuff that's very technical. Like besides, there's one visual effects shot. So let's take a look at that, and then let's look at the sound because that was more technical and had a lot constructed in post. So there's one visual effects shot where, the hiker's face comes up, and then we see the monster. And I mean, I think you can tell looking at it, but what the raw footage here is, this is of a mask. Excuse me. I had an export over the top just to make scrolling through the timeline. Hopefully, I thought that might get things to load a little quicker as I was scrolling through. You have this shot of it's just like a Halloween mask. And it's a good mask. This came from what is their site name? I think the Horror Dome, I think is the name of the site. And so I took this, it's a great looking mask. Let's full screen this. I think it looks great. It's got a lot of kind of like granular detail on it. I really like the kind of splattering of, just like the paint job on it. I like it a lot. And this is also, I mean, it's two elements. It's that like skull mask, which has like hair on it. And then there's black fur, which came from a piece of costuming I got for a short film I did a couple years ago called The Raven. And that is a short film about a man who transforms into this like giant bird monster. It's a really fun short film. I really enjoy it. I enjoy still watching it. It's an older project. I made it during high school, so it's like it's aged, but it's a lot of fun. It's kind of a werewolf story, and there's romance and there's drama and it's a musical, so it's a lot of fun. But I had this black kind of this is a collar. Basically, this is like a black, like furry collar. And so we're just pairing that with this mask. Like that's the monster. And so using Photoshop, I added in these eyes, and those are completely tracked in. It's just a 2D track over the raw footage. You can see with the eyes, we're changing the color a little bit around the mask as well. So let's look at the overlay. This is what's coming with it. So it's just a little bit of the area around the mask. It's been recolored slightly, and you can see there's some kind of color bleeding out from around the mask as well to just kind of make sure the mask has the, color temperature I want. Also, like part of what's nice about like tracking in the eyes with part of the mask as well, so that I can use the detail of the nose and the wrinkles there to kind of help position it with the footage below it to make sure everything matches. And the eyes like don't track perfectly to the mask because I think there's a little bit of three-dimensional movement as he tilts the mask to look a little bit more directly into camera. And so the eyes kind of feel like they bounce around in the socket for like a little bit. There's a little bit of drift there. But I also kind of like that. It kind of makes the eyes feel a little bit more alive to me. I don't know. I don't see it as a tracking error. I see it as there's a little bit more life in the shot. Maybe I'm tripping. And then this light leak was, I threw that in the edit just to kind of get the color temperature the way I want it. I don't know if color temperature is exactly the word I'm going for. I used it. What masking? Excuse me. Masking. What am I trying to say? The composite mode was overlay. That's what I'm trying to say. So it's just I used it to bring the colors into a little bit more blue, darken the shot a little bit more, add a little bit more contrast. Playing with composite modes is a lot of fun, and I always recommend figuring out what they do, because that if you don't know much about like photo editing, there's a whole world out there of things that you can do with overlays, playing with different composite modes. So that can add a lot of flavor to your shots, if you know what you're doing. So like I really like the way this turns out. There's a lot more contrast with the shot now, because without that that final overlay, it's just like this is not as impactful. Like this could be good enough, but bringing that contrast, you can see that filled in there's a little bit more shadow around the eyes now, and the eyes pop out a little bit more, and the skull feels a little bit darker. There's more shadow for details to kind of hide in the shadows, and I like that. I think it makes it just, there's something about that kind of wettens the mask a little bit more by adding that contrast. It's like it focuses on the specular highlights a little bit. To me, I don't know. To me, it makes it feel more like slimy, something about it, or sleek, by increasing the contrast. So that's the one visual effect shot in the film, and the only other reason I have different video tracks is for titles. And there's not much to say about these titles. They're just white text with drop shadow. So let's see. Do I have anything I want to say specifically about the sound effects timeline? This is just the final export on the sound. I just had that in just to make scrolling a little bit easier. I don't even know if that helped for a project like this, but for a project that had like a lot of green screen elements, it would help to be able to show off the timeline with an export on top just to make things easier. But let's talk about, there's a lot of different things I could talk about with the sound clips in here, but I'm just going to kind of show you how it looks. I don't know, like there's not, I approach the soundtrack very kind of non-traditionally to how I usually approach soundtracks. I didn't even really feel like I was composing when I did it. And a lot of the like drones and stuff were kind of stock drone assets, that I used within the score. So this kind of dark Atmos sound, like that's one of those. But then Heartbeat, that's like, and that plays, it just kind of gives you a thump, 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 thump. That's just a little, I basically think of it as a sound effect. But it is a musical element, and that's something I compose, this low bass that has, it's just like, I composed that, but it's just like a low drone. And I just wanted it to hit the note I want. I use these impacts all the time for thums, and I didn't create those, but I use them musically in the film. Heartbeat, like I said, that's just a thump, 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 thump with a rising synth. And I created that asset, but it's like I don't really think of it as composing music, even though it is composing. But it's just like for this, I just really wanted to be in touch with like just what is the soundscape I'm trying to create, what are the emotions I'm trying to convey, and letting that inform everything. But it's just like, and that's just the language of horror movies. That's not like, that doesn't come from like my own thoughts about horror, but that just comes from trying to tap into like, well, how are horror movies constructed, and what can I do to, try to create those, like use the edit to create those moments, right? Horror movies, like something I love about the way that they're constructed is leading up to the scare. And you can see that in the timeline. Now I'm bringing in all these sounds. There's these whooshes, these risers, there's that growl, there's this music that splashes. I created that asset, and that's just like cymbals going just to kind of increase the tension as he looks back up and faces the monster, right? And there's horror in his eyes, and you hear that just alarm bells going off in his brain, and then the monster growls. And the growling of the monster is a couple of different assets, sound-wise. So train tracks, there's a little bit of a whine of, I live near train tracks, and they just have this kind of like howl kind of sound. They whistle as they break, And so I captured that audio. There's a bird call, and this video clip sound effect came from a video I got of a turkey. It was just a single turkey in the woods as I was hiking, and it just went, it just kind of called in the distance, and I pitched that down, and that combined especially with the like as that sound repeats, this is a growl as well, that I got online, and that added that. I mean, that really created the identity of the monster. This growl as well, of course, for the final growl was very important as well. But as far as what I recorded, it was these three things layered together, and they're pretty soft in the mixed, and I use like these growls a little bit more prominently, but I like the texture that those three things add. And basically, whenever you hear the monster kind of call out from the distance, you hear those three assets and in this growl as well. And that's kind of an important part of the quality of the sound, layering that all together. So I think that's about wraps up everything I want to say about the project here. So comment down below if you have any questions. Feel free to watch the short on its own in full on my main channel. So everyone, thank you so much for watching. Without further ado, I will see you in the next video.